I'm not exaggerating when I tell you that he was a completely different person, and I'm so grateful that I stuck with it and figured out how to help my son. Hello and welcome to Homemaking with Joy. I'm Rachel, and today's video is all about improving my toddler's behavior by improving his diet. I've been asked about this a lot in my personal circles and wanted to share it here in case it could help anyone else. I was very lost when these symptoms first popped up. People told me that it was just toddler behavior, but I was convinced it was something more, and thankfully I was correct to look into it, to try harder, and to take care of my son. In case you're new here, like I said, my name is Rachel. I'm a wife of almost 7 years. I have 3 young boys, ages 4 and under, and I am a busy mom. I consider motherhood my ministry. I love this job. It is the most important job I could ever do, raising 3 little eternal souls to hopefully love Jesus and follow him, which is why I work so hard at it, and I enjoy sharing what I learn and how I make things work with you. You'll see a lot about food on my channel, and that's because I think food is really important, which begs the question, why? Why do I think food is so important? Why do I take so much time growing food and preserving food and cooking from scratch and doing all the dishes that come from it? Why do I fight against picky eaters and feed my toddlers things that aren't typical in today's society? I believe we cannot walk in God's will and do the best that we can unless we are healthy. There are extenuating circumstances. There are always outliers. I understand that. But generally speaking, I can do my best work when I'm healthy. It's just true. If my health is failing, if I am suffering, if I'm in pain, I can't do my best at whatever my job is. And for me, motherhood is my ministry. Motherhood is my job. Being a wife, being a homemaker, taking care of 3 little souls that the Lord has given me to hopefully shepherd, to love him. And that is huge. But their little brains can't work the same way if their bodies aren't working well too. I have seen that in my own life. I've seen that in others' lives. And so giving my family really nutritious, good food is extremely important to me. And part of the reason, part of the way that I got to feeling this way is through my son. Thankfully, I was primed to notice. I was aware that food could affect behavior, because when I saw these symptoms in him, it took a couple tries and it took lots of data collection to see it. But I saw that what I was feeding him was hurting him, and it was coming out in other symptoms. So I'd like to share a little bit of my son's story in case it helps anybody else, in case you can learn something from it. And I'm so grateful that we have a good relationship with food now, and my son is thriving. I have some notes here, so forgive me if I look down, but I want to make sure I get my information correct. The first time I saw his symptoms were he was 3 years old, and it was after Thanksgiving. So the holidays are really rough. I noticed these after Thanksgiving, after Christmas, and that's when I started to put 2 and 2 together. These big family gatherings, he was 3 years old. We would go to the gatherings, and of course toddlers don't like to eat different or new food, so he wouldn't eat a lot of the main dish, and because it was a holiday, I let him have some dessert. I don't want to restrict anything or have that connotation with food, so I'm like, yes, you can have some dessert. Well, the following days were awful. I describe his symptoms of ADHD-like symptoms. He was bouncing off the walls. He couldn't stand still. If he were trying to talk to me, he'd be moving around. He'd be moving his arms. He could not calm himself. It was very obvious to me that it was a physical reaction. He could not control the hyperactivity in his body. He wouldn't listen to me like he did before. Toddlers always have their days, of course, but it was different. I could tell that it was different. He was defiant, yelling in my face, standing on the couch, just like trying to be at my level and yell no right in my face, which he had never done before. Of course, he disagrees with me, but not to that extent. He just had a complete lack of self-control and really impulse control. If a thought came into his mind, he just did it immediately. Again, we all struggle with self-control at some times, but his was next level. It was Again, I knew it was different. And moms, you know your kids. So if someone tells you this is just normal toddler behavior, trust your gut. You know your children better than anyone else. And I knew something was wrong. This was not my son. This was not who he was. It took about 4 days to detox. So he was this ADHD-like child, defiant, lack of impulse control, all of these things for about 4 days. And on the 5th day, he woke up and he was sweet and back to normal and kind, like nothing had ever happened. And I thought, oh my, it just switched like a flip. Switched like a flip, flipped like a switch. He was completely different again. And so I saw it at Thanksgiving. I saw it again at Christmas. Okay, this is enough information. How do I make it better? Because my son is suffering. His body is under stress. He is not well when he is in this state. And I cannot continue to let this happen. I really started to take notice of what he was eating. First at the family gatherings, not a lot of main dish, so not a lot of protein, not a lot of calories, and then some dessert, which are high in sugar, high in processed foods. And those are big triggers for him. So I saw it again, like I said, at Christmas. And then even in our own household, things that were higher sugar, or if we went to a family member's house and he would eat something higher in sugar, that would really mess him up for the next day. Thankfully, because I was aware of this, the detox periods were much shorter after that. So if he had a little bit of dessert, it was only like 1 day he was out of sorts instead of a whole 4 days. And so I watched that. Sugar, processed foods, artificial dyes and colors, preservatives. We don't eat a lot of that here. So when we go out and he has them, his body does not like them. And it's very obvious to me that his body does not like them. Recently, I've also learned as we've taken those out of the equation, it's been easier to see new triggers or new changes in his behavior, most likely because of food. And that is blood sugar spikes. So if he doesn't pair protein with his carbs, he can have that blood sugar spike, and I can tell when he's dysregulated. And so recently I've been working on getting more protein in his diet and especially pairing things together. Like if he has a snack of just pretzels. Pretzels aren't a terrible processed food. I'm happy to pull those out on occasion if we're running out of the house or whatever. However, he cannot eat them by themselves. If he has just a bowl of pretzels, he will react to it. And so we add some cheese, we add a cup of milk, we add something else to go with it to help balance out that blood sugar. I am not kidding. I've learned so much more about food in this past year in attempts to help my son. And I hear this from lots of moms. When your child needs you, you learn. You just pull up your big girl pants and you learn because your kid needs you. And I'm so grateful that I have access to this knowledge, that I can learn this and that I can help him. This is a big reason why I choose to cook from scratch. And I think a lot of other families should too. If it affects my son this way, I'm sure it affects my body, my husband's body, my other kids' bodies the same way. We're just more resilient to it. But like those blood sugar spikes and things, I'm sure our bodies feel that way. Does my body like artificial food dye? No, I just don't react to it the same way. So it's really important for me to know exactly what's in our food. And the best way to do that is to cook from scratch, from the most basic ingredients, to know exactly what's going in our mouths, to fuel our bodies. Because again, the rest of our lives don't work well if our physical bodies are not up for it. And especially children, they're such physical beings. You know, their brains are developing so much and they don't have impulse control, and they're just learning so much. And so a lot of their mood, a lot of their day is based on how their body feels. And I've seen this in both of my kids who eat. I have a baby, so it doesn't matter for him. But what I feed them really does impact their day, their mood, their physical bodies. And so it's really important to me to cook from scratch, which is again, why you see this all over my channel. I want to share this with other moms, with other families, but make it approachable, not so daunting to start cooking from scratch, but one thing at a time, finding healthier alternatives for our kids' sake. A lot of people then ask me, isn't he going to have a bad relationship with food if you're constantly telling him, no, you can't have that, no, you can't have that, no, you can't have that? Yes and no. I want him to have a healthy relationship with food, but in a way, I want him to know what makes his body feel good, what's actually nutritious. If I purposefully feed my child something that I know is going to hurt him, I don't think that's right. but he also has to understand what makes his body feel good and what does not make his body feel good. So as a mom, he's only 4 years old. It is my job to make sure he eats well, but I do my best to explain the process along the way. So he'll ask for something if we're out and about. I say, no, that doesn't give your body a lot of nutrition, or that doesn't make you feel good, or when you eat that, you have a hard time controlling yourself. And so here is something else. I always like to replace it with something better. And really this only happens when we're out of the house. He doesn't expect to have, I don't know, M&Ms in the house. He doesn't expect to have goldfish in the house. He doesn't expect any of those things because we don't eat them on a regular basis. So if we're at a friend's house, or if we're at a family gathering, or we're walking through the grocery store and he sees something that looks interesting to him, those are usually my responses. Now, I have already laid a foundation for those conversations at home. While we're sitting around at lunch, we will talk about what part of our meal has protein in it, what part of our meal has carbs, what part of our meal has healthy fats, what part of our meal just tastes good, because we have that too. So if we're like maybe at the dinner table, we'll have chicken, we'll have some potatoes, we'll have green beans, and then sometimes I like to have Chick-fil-A dip because they like Chick-fil-A sauce. It's delicious. So he'll ask, what is the protein? Well, the chicken is the protein. And I'll say, what does protein do for you? And he has learned protein helps you get big muscles, which little boys really like. And so he'll eat his meal and then he'll flex for me to show me his big muscles from eating all that protein. And then he'll say, where are the carbs? I say, well, the potatoes are the carbs. And carbs give us energy to run really far and really fast because little boys love to run. So carbs are energy. They're not bad, they're energy. Go for it, enjoy your potatoes. Well, where are the fats? I cooked the potatoes in lard, and so there's good fat in there to help your brain grow and to keep you feeling full and satisfied. The green beans are our vegetable. They have vitamins and minerals. They're from our garden. We can feel proud and happy to eat those. And then the Chick-fil-A dip, he knows that just tastes good. It just makes the chicken taste good. And having a little bit of dip with our chicken is not a big deal. So that's kind of how I phrase it. We talk about that on a very regular basis, so he knows what he's eating. He knows what has protein. He knows the proteins and the carbs help balance each other out and help make him feel really good. If talking to your toddlers about this feels overwhelming to you, you are not alone. If you are having trouble with this information, if you don't know everything I've just said, that's okay. We all have to start somewhere. And again, a year or so ago, I didn't know a lot of this information either, which is again why I want to share. I'm so grateful for the foundation of knowledge that I had to keep looking deeper, to stick with it, to know that this was not my child, to know that food could have an impact on our bodies and our lives the way it does. It is so true. And you keep learning. I'm constantly learning new things. And so maybe a year from now, this sort of conversation will be different. But so far, I'm really happy with it. My kids know what they're eating. They know why they eat it. They know what it gives them. They're going to be helping me in the garden this year. So when they can see the seed that they planted turn into food, they're excited about it. We eat colorful food. We eat delicious food. Like if you cook from scratch and it doesn't taste good, it doesn't matter that you cook from scratch because no one's going to eat it. We want to eat food that's delicious. And so hopefully you can find that on my channel because I love sharing it. Like my kids, they don't eat a lot of typical kid food because it's never been an option. But they will eat chicken pot pie that I make from scratch or whatever the case is because that's what we eat. We've built a culture around it. We've built a conversation around it. And we do things really intentionally. If you're just starting your real food journey or you're watching this because you think your child has some of these behavior habits, whatever the case is, where should you start? According to me, and I'm just a mom with a kid who has lived through this, so take everything I say with a grain of salt. Go investigate for yourself, research for yourself, please. Where would I suggest you start? For me, it was most helpful to start with data collection, food log, journal, keeping mental notes, whatever you need to do, to see what your child eats and how he or she behaves or responds afterward. With toddlers, I control everything they eat. because they're with me. So that was pretty easy to see correlations. If they're out of the house, that might be a little bit more challenging. But start with data collection and then see if you can find the biggest triggers, the most drastic triggers. For us, it was sugar, and I'm guessing the sugar caused blood sugar spikes, which really affected his behavior. But for some people, it's food dyes. I have a friend who, her son, if he has food dyes, he has muscle weakness. He literally can't lift his arms if he has yellow food dye. And so what is most triggering your child? You got to figure that out. And again, you are the mom. Nobody knows them better than you. So don't feel discouraged. It may take some time, but keep pressing forward because you will figure it out. No one cares as much as you care, and you can do it because you are their mom and they're counting on you. So you can do it. Don't give up. Okay. Next, after you have done your data collection, after you have figured out what the big triggers are, make little swaps, really small. So maybe instead of like a sugary store-bought yogurt cup, you can just buy plain yogurt and mix in your own sweetener. So I buy plain Greek yogurt. I like to mix in maple syrup. You can use honey. And then you can add your toppings like normal. So instead of the small cups of sugary laden whatever it is, just make your own at home. And you can buy it in bulk. It's probably less expensive that way too. If your child likes to eat crackers, you can just learn how to make crackers yourself. Now, a lot of people think that's not easy. It actually is easy. Just look it up. It's like 4 ingredients and you just roll it out on a baking sheet and bake it. It's super simple. You can totally do it. If you are as invested in your kids' health as I think you are by watching this video, you can totally do it. You can do it. If you're concerned about meals, make little swaps. Or something I like to do is recreate meals they've had elsewhere. So again, with that chicken dinner I mentioned earlier, we have the chicken, we have the potatoes, we have the veggie, and we have the Chick-fil-A sauce. It's like Chick-fil-A at home. I make the chicken and then they get to dip the grilled nuggets in the Chick-fil-A sauce and then they get to eat potatoes. Is it the same? No, but it's cheaper, it's at home, and it's accessible to me. So finding ways like that to get your kids involved or to make connections that way, I have found helps too. One last tip that I'd like to share in relation to family gatherings is when we have food signups go around, I almost always sign up for a dessert. I'd like my kids to eat the main meal at the family gathering, but if they don't, I still want them to have a safe option or a better option for dessert because I don't want them to feel left out. I want to say yes to them, but I'm going to bring a better option. So instead of the super sugary, super artificial, whatever dessert that was brought, they can have one of my homemade chocolate chip cookies, which I know they've had before, they really like. They can even have more than one. And that gives them the feeling of participating, of having abundance because they can have more than one cookie. And I know that it won't affect their bodies the same way that the cake or the pudding or the pie will. If you think it would be helpful to have more details to our story, or you'd like more tips for helping your kids, cooking from scratch, making that transition, whatever it may be, please let me know in the comments of how else I can help. I'm really passionate about this topic. I think fueling our kids well is one of the best things that we can do for them when they're little. And so I really like to chat about this topic. If you haven't already, please like the video and subscribe to the channel so you can see more like this, more recipes, more ways that I cook for my family that are realistic for a mom of 3 kids, 4 and under, but also as nutritious as possible. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.